Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, we continue to see old concepts, objects, and the names of certain characters take on new shapes and sizes. One of the biggest examples of this is the surprising creative direction in making Rauru the first king of Hyrule, that is Azonai. However, he is still considered the Sage of Light, just like his Old Man Hylian form that we knew previously from Ocarina of Time. While we can go down a rabbit hole of theories with Rauru, there are two characters from Ocarina of Time that could also have new forms in this new era of Zelda lore and history that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have established. Those characters are Princess Ruto of the Zora and Nabooru, the leader of the Gerudo. To start, it's hard to defend them fully existing in Tears of the Kingdom's continuity outside of Ocarina of Time. So I'll present ideas and evidence that I can find, and it's up to you, the audience, to decide whether they have taken new forms in this new continuity or not. Let's start with the possibility of a new Princess Ruto. This one actually has the most evidence, so please stick around as I explain. In both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the Zora Stone monuments share history of Princess Ruto and stories of her legacy. Before I even get into what they say, it's clear that the history of Ruto is shared among the Zora in this era, as King Dorephan wrote the first set of monuments long before the events of Breath of the Wild, as well as Mipha referencing a certain Zora princess that loved a Hylian swordsman in her diary. But more on that in a bit. That's actually a more interesting take. As for Tears of the Kingdom, Sidon continues writing on Ruto in a second set of monuments with information that King Dorephan and Mipha did not write beforehand. Now, it's important to note that the first set of monuments were written by King Dorephan in Breath of the Wild. The second set of monuments were written by Sidon in Tears of the Kingdom, writing over what was previously written in the first set, since apparently the first set of monuments written by Dorephan were heavily damaged by the time of Tears of the Kingdom. We'll be looking at the Breath of the Wild ones first, and then the Tears of the Kingdom ones. In Dorephan's History of the Zora Part 5, a Princess Ruto existed long ago in a past more distant than that of the Great Calamity or Divine Beast Vah Ruta. Similar to Ocarina of Time, she was an attendant to a Zora patron deity, which can be assumed to be Lord Jabu Jabu. While some believe this is somehow directly referencing Ocarina of Time, I do want to argue against this, so let's proceed forward. Ruto was highly respected and loved among the Zora, but during her lifetime, an evil man with, quote, designs on ruling the world appeared, bringing disaster upon Zora's domain. Clearly, this is referencing an iteration of Ganondorf. It continues to say that Ruto would then awaken as a sage and face the foe alongside the princess and hero of legend. Now, this quote is important because these events do not come from Ocarina of Time in the child timeline, so there's some continuity issues here, unless this Ruto being mentioned is not from Ocarina of Time. This next quote makes things even crazier. Her achievements are remembered not only by the Zora, but also forever etched in the history of Hyrule. So, I'm a huge hater of the Dragon Break timelines coming together theory where they all come together, and this quote right here kinda defends what I believe. So if Ruto's achievements are forever etched in all of Hyrule's history, why don't we hear about them in the adult timeline? I do not believe Ruto from Wind Waker is Ruto, so there's another continuity issue there. The Ruto being mentioned here must be a different Ruto from a whole different era. The script ends with the decision to name Divine Beast Vah Ruta, built ages later to face off Calamity Ganon, in honor of Ruto. Okay, so what happens if you wear the Vah Ruta helmet in Tears of the Kingdom? Well, when we jump all the way to Tears of the Kingdom and put on the Vah Ruta helmet on, Sidon's avatar wears the helmet of the Water Sage in Tears of the Kingdom's past. See what I'm getting at? Could this Zora Sage character that's unnamed, unfortunately, actually be a new version of Ruto that exists alongside this new version of Rauru? Well, let's look deeper into what Tears of the Kingdom says about Princess Ruto. I want to bring up some arguments people might have against this theory, but I'll have to do that after we go over what Tears of the Kingdom says about Ruto. So in Sidon's Learnings of the Zora, Part 2, Ruto is immediately called and is confirmed to be a great ancestor. More on that later in the video. Sidon writes that she was a Zora princess who was strong-willed and meandering as a winding river. Sidon then writes about a powerful and wicked man who tried to take over Hyrule and brought great ruin to Zora's domain, which is clearly Ganondorf. The script continues with tales of fallen Zora soldiers drifting down the river and a so-called chaotic retreat of the Zora. Whoa, this does not sound like Ocarina of Time. This sounds like something way more gruesome. Sidon then writes about Ruto fighting back and holding back her tears, bearing witness to misery and devastation happening to the domain. It is then written that Ruto helped the weak and elderly escape? Okay, this is definitely not Ocarina of Time. The history of the script begins to close out with saying that she swam against the river's current and climbed the mighty waterfall to challenge her foe? Who is that? Ganondorf? By herself? But Sidon admits that the history from this point gets hazy. More on that later, but he then ends the history portion of this writing with the Princess of Hyrule and the hero of legend aiding Ruto in saving Hyrule. Now that right there, the hero of legend, is something someone can use to argue against all of this. It's clear that Link or some hero did not exist in the past when Zelda went back in time and worked with these sages to seal Ganondorf. Link supposing to be there is written in both of the Breath of the Wild and the Tears of the Kingdom monument history about Ruto. Well, I have a couple things to say about that. First, could Rauru be depicted as the hero? It's theorized that the ancient hero's aspect could be a Zonai that could also be mentioned on Breath of the Wild's tapestry depicting the first great calamity. So there's my argument back. And second, Sidon admits that the rest of history has fallen victim to the haze of time before he writes about the Princess of Hyrule and the hero of legend, meaning that this specific battle with Ganondorf can be slightly different and be missing details. That's something King Dorephan did not write. Now, Mipha's reference to Ruto in her diary does say she fell in love with the Hylian swordsman, which definitely does not happen in Tears of the Kingdom's past. Or does it? Because hold on, it actually doesn't say that Ruto, nor does it say the Hylian swordsman was Link. In Mipha's diary, she specifically refers to an old legend about a Zora princess falling in love with the Hylian swordsman. Hold on, I thought Ruto's achievements were forever etched into the history of Hyrule. If Dorephan and Sidon knew about Ruto's history, why didn't Mipha specifically mention her name? And why didn't Mipha know about her in general? Unless she was not referencing Ruto from Ocarina of Time again. So, for this water sage to be a new iteration of Ruto, you guys are probably wanting me to put more pieces together. And I don't blame you. We still need to discuss the history of Ganondorf and the imprisoning war. But before that, let's look at another sage, Nabooru. The Gerudo. This tribe of warrior women continuously do a great job at keeping their lore and history intact. This was done so well that now looking back at Breath of the Wild, there is clear foreshadowing of Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom. Urbosa, the fallen champion of the Gerudo and former chief, mentions Ganon taking the form of a Gerudo man twice in Breath of the Wild. Once in her diary that can be found in the chief's bedroom, which is above the throne room, and Urbosa mentions it again in literal spoken lines in the cutscene after defeating Thunderblight Ganon.
It was written that Calamity Ganon once adopted the form of a Gerudo. And that will make this victory all the more satisfying. I like that. Now I can take this personally.
Also, remember why the Gerudo don't allow men into their town. Because of Ganondorf. Remember that in Four Swords Adventures, the 4 Link boys go into some form of a Gerudo town. Thus, if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are at the end of all the timelines, which includes being after Four Swords Adventures, why would Urbosa be referring to Ocarina of Time Ganondorf? Ocarina of Time happens before Four Swords Adventures, so how did men somehow regain access into Gerudo Town and then lose it again? Going back to Urbosa and the line she spoke in that specific cutscene, there is something even more important and crazy. I really hoped you guys stick around for this, but here we go. Urbosa literally calls out, in a spoken line, to Nabooru.
Nabooru, legend of the Gerudo, celebrated over ages. And you, who were named to honor her, you are a legend as well. Isn't that right, Naboris? The bitter essence of defeat from a century ago still sits upon my tongue.
While Nabooru is called a legend, it's clear that Va Naboris, the divine beast, was named after her. In Riju's Breath of the Wild diary, we learn that Riju's mom calls Naboris a deity of protection. This means that Naboris is tied to an entity that is well respected. It must be Nabooru. But wait a minute, is it Nabooru from Ocarina of Time? Who's the Sage of Spirit in this era? Minoru the Zonai, sister of King Rauru. Can this new Nabooru be the Sage of something else then? Yes, the original Sage of Lightning from Tears of the Kingdom's past. So if you think I'm totally far-fetched and think that Ruto and Nabooru being mentioned have to be the ones from Ocarina of Time and nobody else, let me say this. Why isn't there any information on Rauru being a Hylian then? The Rauru from Ocarina of Time built the Temple of Time that we see in Ocarina of Time. This was done after the Skyward Sword era. So that might have been a little bit confusing, but just understand this, there are multiple Temples of Time. But Rauru, the Zonai King of Hyrule, is also connected to the construction of the Temple of Time in Tears of the Kingdom, the main one, the one in the sky. Now, who is remembered in Tears of the Kingdom? Rauru, the Zonai King. And it even goes further than that. Zelda and Pyrrha both studied super ancient history of Rauru as the first king of Hyrule, not some Hylian old man. They are both aware of King Rauru before Zelda time travels. Even if recorded history of the specific events of Ocarina of Time exist in this era, then why is Rauru as an old man Hylian not mentioned? Even if you think Tears of the Kingdom retcons Breath of the Wild's history, Ruto is still mentioned in both games. Speaking of Ruto, there is also a correlation with the word ancestor. The new sages all refer to the previous sages as their ancestors. Numerous times actually, they do this, and in many different conversations. And in Sidon's Learning of the Zora Part 2, he calls Ruto a great ancestor, like how I said earlier. Ruto's name is also used to name many locations in Zora's domain. There is also a similarity with Darunia. Darunia Lake is one of the biggest locations in Eldin. Speaking of Darunia, here's a cool fun fact. While there isn't any actual connection in-game with Darunia, if you switch the 4 first letters around in Rudania, the name of the Eldin divine beast, you can spell Darunia. Darunia, Rudania, Darunia. So, there's even a connection here with the 3rd sage. To start the wrap-up, I still need to discuss Ganondorf and some history. If Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are so dang frickin' far in the future, like significantly more than 10,000 years, how could there be history of Ocarina of Time's time period? It makes more sense that regardless of whatever the timeline looks like, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are closely related to their respective eras of the past established in both of their games, and nothing is in between them. No games are in between the past of Breath of the Wild and the past of Tears of the Kingdom and present day Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It goes past Tears of the Kingdom, past Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Similar actually to Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 and their backstories. Now, Ganondorf sealed created the calamities. As Ganondorf turns into a dragon at the climax of Tears of the Kingdom, he first takes on a serpent-like shape before turning into the Demon King Draconified. This serpent shape is very, very similar to the spectral form of Calamity Ganon. I bring this up because I don't think there was another Ganondorf in between past and present Tears of the Kingdom. I think that the Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf was the only one in that era's history, and all writings of him that we hear and see in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is referring to him and not any other Ganondorf. And with all of that, I believe a soft reboot of Ocarina of Time type of situation here, where the sages of Tears of the Kingdom's past have the same names as their Ocarina of Time counterparts, and Ganondorf's main story is retold. There are exceptions to this, which mainly includes the Ruto Sage of Wind. Now that all of that has been said, this has been Skylink Shock, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to share this video with your friends and tell them about Skylink Shock. Take care and have an awesome day. You guys deserve it. Skylink Shock out.